My name is Sarah, and I want to share my experience of learning from my stepdad as a mentor because it was one of the most transformative periods of my life. And I remember feeling frustrated and overwhelmed at first because schoolwork, hobbies, and personal projects were challenging for me. And I often didn't know how to approach tasks or organize my time efficiently. And I would sometimes procrastinate or get stuck on details, feeling stuck and unsure of how to improve. And my stepdad noticed my struggles. And instead of criticizing, he offered guidance patiently, saying things like, "Let's break this task into smaller steps," or "I can show you a method that works." And these phrases immediately helped me feel less anxious because he modeled instructional language naturally, and he taught me how to ask questions politely, explain what I didn't understand, and request clarification, which was exactly what I needed to develop both practical skills and English fluency simultaneously. And I remember one evening when I was struggling to follow a science experiment for school, and he said, "First, gather all the materials. Then measure carefully. If you're unsure, ask me to explain each step." And just hearing the structured instructions made the task feel manageable. And I realized that following step-by-step guidance not only helped me complete the assignment, but also improved my ability to understand sequence words, verbs of instruction, and conditional phrases, because I had to say things like, "Can you show me how to measure the liquid accurately?" Or, "Do I stir first or add the powder?" And receiving answers from him taught me how to clarify, repeat instructions, and paraphrase for understanding, which is a critical skill in learning English. And this mentoring extended beyond academics, because my stepdad also offered to teach me cooking, which was a hobby I wanted to improve. And during our first cooking lesson, he demonstrated each step slowly, saying, "First, chop the onions finely, then saute them for 2 minutes until translucent. After that, add the tomatoes," and I followed along, repeating the instructions aloud to practice pronunciation, sequence, and clarity, saying things like, "I chopped the onions first. Now I will saute them." And as we moved on to more complex dishes, I learned to ask questions naturally, like, "Do I stir continuously or occasionally? Or should I add the spices now or later?" And these questions not only helped me cook successfully, but also gave me practice in forming complete, polite, and contextually appropriate sentences in English. And as we cooked together, my stepdad encouraged me to think critically and explain my reasoning, asking questions like, "Why do you think the onions should be sautéed first?" Or, "Can you predict what will happen if we skip this step?" And answering these questions forced me to use conditional language, cause and effect phrases, and logical connectors like, if I skip sautéing, the onions might taste raw and the flavor will not be balanced, which improved my academic and conversational English simultaneously. And beyond cooking, he taught me budgeting skills, showing me how to plan allowances, save for goals, and track expenses. And he explained steps like, first, write down all your expenses for the month. Then categorize them into essentials and non-essentials. Next, set a savings goal, and I repeated each step aloud, asking questions like, if I spend more than planned on snacks, does it affect my savings? Or can I adjust the budget for next month? And by practicing this language of planning, instruction, and questioning, I improved my ability to use English for practical, real-life situations, and he also encouraged me to practice sports, teaching me techniques for basketball and swimming. saying things like, keep your elbow in while shooting, or kick steadily while swimming freestyle. And I repeated these instructions, asked clarifying questions, and described my movements, saying, I tried to keep my elbow in, but I need more practice. And these phrases reinforced vocabulary for actions, sequencing, and body movement, while also giving me confidence and explaining what I was doing and what I needed, which is an essential skill for instructional English and self-expression. And throughout all these activities, I noticed that my confidence grew not only in skills, but also in using English actively because I had to articulate needs, describe processes, ask and answer questions, and explain reasoning. And I realized that being mentored by my stepdad created a safe environment where mistakes were part of the learning process. And every error became an opportunity to practice polite correction, ask for clarification, or try alternative expressions. And this immersive, hands-on practice allowed me to internalize both practical skills and English communication simultaneously. And reflecting on these experiences, I saw how mentoring, instruction, and self-explanation helped me develop critical thinking, sequencing skills, vocabulary expansion, clarity of expression, and confidence. And I noticed that I could now explain processes in complete sentences, provide step-by-step instructions, ask and answer questions, negotiate tasks, and even teach someone else a skill in English using instructional phrases like, first, do this. Next, do that. If this happens, then try that, which felt natural and empowering. And I realized that this was far more effective than rote memorization, because applying English actively in real contexts made it meaningful, memorable, and useful. And through consistent practice with my stepdad as a mentor, I developed not only competence in cooking, sports, budgeting, and academics, but also fluency, confidence, and the ability to express myself clearly in English in everyday life. And this combination of practical skill building, instructional practice, and self-talk created a transformative learning environment because I could see immediate results, receive feedback, and apply new vocabulary and phrases in multiple contexts, which reinforced retention and mastery. And over weeks and months, the cumulative effect of mentorship, interactive learning, and active engagement allowed me to confidently navigate challenges, describe processes, explain reasoning, and ask and answer questions in English fluently, which also increased my overall confidence in school, hobbies, and social interactions. And as I narrate this story now, I hope viewers understand that having a mentor, especially someone who is patient, structured, and encouraging like my stepdad, not only teaches practical skills, but also provides a real-life platform for immersive English learning, because the combination of guidance, questioning, explanation, reflection, and hands-on practice builds competence and confidence. And the lessons I learned about asking questions, explaining steps, following instructions, negotiating tasks, describing processes, and expressing preferences will stay with me forever, because they are not just about cooking or sports or budgeting. They are about learning how to communicate effectively, learn efficiently, and grow confidently in English while developing valuable life skills. As the weeks went by, my stepdad continued mentoring me in more complex tasks. And I realized that every activity, whether cooking a multi-step recipe, mastering a sports technique, or managing a small budget, was an opportunity to practice English in a real-life, meaningful context. And I remember weekend when he introduced me to a new challenge, preparing a 3-course meal for the family. And at first, I felt nervous because I had never coordinated multiple dishes at once. And I wasn't sure if I could keep track of timing, ingredients, or steps, but he calmly explained, "Sarah, let's break this down. First, we'll prepare the appetizer, then the main course, and finally, the dessert. I'll guide you through each step, and you can ask questions anytime." And hearing this made me feel reassured because he was modeling clear, structured instructional language. And I started by asking questions like, do I chop all the vegetables at once or one at a time? And he responded patiently, chop them one at a time, and as you finish each, put them in separate bowls so we stay organized and following his instructions. I narrated my actions aloud, saying, I chopped the onions first and placed them in a bowl. Now I will slice the bell peppers, and this constant verbalization helped me practice sequencing, verbs of action, and descriptive phrases naturally. And as we moved on to sauteing, seasoning, and monitoring cooking times, I asked clarifying questions like, should I stir continuously or occasionally? Or do I add the spices now or later? And I repeated his explanations aloud to ensure understanding, saying things like, I will stir continuously for 2 minutes and then add the spices, which strengthened both listening comprehension and spoken fluency. And when small mistakes happened, like burning a part of the dish or mismeasuring an ingredient, my stepdad used these moments as teaching opportunities, saying, it's okay. Sarah, let's analyze what went wrong and try again. What would you do differently? And I practiced explaining my reasoning, using phrases like, I think I added the salt too early, so the flavor was too strong. Next time, I will wait until the sauce simmers, and this reflective practice reinforced critical thinking, vocabulary for cause and effect, and the ability to articulate observations clearly, which are essential English skills. And beyond cooking, he also guided me in sports, introducing more advanced basketball techniques like dribbling under pressure, shooting from different angles, and coordinating with teammates. And while practicing, I had to follow detailed instructions, ask questions like, do I pivot before or after passing the ball? And describe my own movements, saying, I dribbled to the left and pivoted before passing. And this verbal practice not only improved my sports skills, but also strengthened my ability to explain processes, describe actions, and use precise verbs in English. And in problem-solving scenarios like organizing a team play, I practiced suggesting strategies, negotiating turns, and explaining my reasoning, saying things like, if we pass the ball to the center first, we can create more space, or I suggest we switch positions to balance defense and offense. And my stepdad encouraged discussion and reasoning, which allowed me to use conditional phrases, sequencing words, and instructional vocabulary naturally. And in addition to cooking and sports, we tackled practical life skills like budgeting for weekly groceries, planning expenses for hobbies, and organizing personal schedules. And he guided me with structured steps, saying, first, list all your planned purchases. Second, categorize them by necessity. Third, compare with your budget. And finally, prioritize spending. And I repeated each step aloud, asking clarifying questions like, if I overspend on one category, can I adjust another? Or should I track daily expenses or weekly? And by doing this, I practice English for practical contexts, instructional language, and conditional reasoning, which strengthen both communication and problem-solving abilities. And he also taught me to give advice to others, encouraging me to explain steps clearly and politely, saying things like, if your friend wants to try this recipe, you can tell them to chop the ingredients first, then follow the cooking order carefully, or when guiding someone in sports, demonstrate first and explain slowly, which reinforced my ability to explain, instruct and mentor, and I also practice receiving advice gracefully, using phrases like, thank you for explaining, I understand now, or I see, I will try it your way next time, which taught me politeness, active listening, and respectful communication. And as I navigated these more complex tasks, I noticed that I was becoming more confident, both in my abilities and in English, because each successful step, each completed dish, each well-executed play, and each well-managed budget reinforced my confidence and my ability to explain, describe, and reason in English, and I also reflected on my emotions, saying things like, I feel proud, because I managed the recipe without mistakes, or I'm excited because I can now coordinate the team effectively, which gave me practice in expressing feelings and opinions, further enhancing conversational fluency, and over time, I began combining all these skills in longer, connected explanations, saying things like first, I chopped the vegetables and set them aside. Then I sautéed them and added spices gradually. While the sauce simmered, I prepared the side dish. And finally, I plated everything, checking flavors before serving, and narrating complex sequences like this allowed me to practice advanced structures, connectors, and transitional phrases. And my stepdad would ask questions and I would respond, which added interactive dialogue and reinforced practical language usage. And by the end of several weeks, I noticed a substantial improvement in my ability to understand instructions, ask precise questions, give advice, describe processes, narrate sequences, and express emotions and reasoning in English. And the mentorship experience also taught me patience, perseverance, and the importance of structured learning. Because following steps carefully, reflecting on mistakes, asking questions, and applying feedback created a natural cycle of learning, communication, and skill building. And as I reflect on this journey now, I see that learning from my stepdad as a mentor was not just about mastering cooking, sports, or budgeting. It was about developing the language of instruction, explanation, and interaction. And every question, every step, every clarification, and every reflection strengthened both my practical skills and my English fluency. And I realized that structured mentorship, combined with self-talk, reflection, and active participation, is one of the most effective ways to improve communication, reasoning, and confidence simultaneously, and that the lessons I learned asking questions, giving and receiving advice, explaining steps, narrating sequences, and reflecting on actions will stay with me forever, shaping my ability to communicate clearly, learn efficiently, and grow confidently in both language and life. And I hope viewers understand that having a mentor, engaging actively, practicing explanation, asking questions, and reflecting thoughtfully can transform both skill and language development, and that every real-life interaction, challenge, and guided experience is an opportunity to strengthen English, critical thinking, and self-confidence naturally and enjoyably. As I look back on the time I spent learning from my stepdad, I realized that this experience was more than just mastering cooking, sports, or budgeting. It was about growing emotionally, building confidence, and improving my English fluency naturally, because every activity required me to think, explain, ask questions, and respond in meaningful ways. And I remember the first moment I truly felt proud of myself, when I completed a complicated recipe by following his instructions step by step. And I narrated my process aloud, saying, first, I prepared all the ingredients. Then I sautéed the vegetables, and finally, I combined everything carefully to achieve the right flavor, and my stepdad nodded approvingly, saying, excellent. Sarah, you followed the steps and explained it clearly. And hearing this reinforced both my confidence in my skills and my ability to articulate processes in English. And over time, I noticed that I could explain more complex sequences and give instructions to others naturally, using phrases like start by doing this, then proceed with that, and finally check for accuracy. Or if you encounter a problem at this stage, try this solution. And I practice asking clarifying questions like, do I add the spices now or after simmering? Or should I repeat this step for accuracy? Which strengthened both my language fluency and my understanding of structured processes. And beyond technical skills, I also reflected on my emotional growth, realizing that I had become more patient, attentive, and resilient. Because learning under guidance required me to listen carefully, accept feedback gracefully, and persevere through challenges without frustration. And I could express these feelings in English, saying things like, I feel proud because I managed the task successfully, or I was nervous at first, but now I feel confident. And by articulating emotions aloud, I reinforce vocabulary for emotions, opinions, and self-reflection, which is essential for authentic communication. And as I mastered more complex skills, I began mentoring others in small ways, using the phrases my stepdad had taught me, saying things like, try following the steps slowly, and ask questions if you're unsure, or observe first. Then perform each action carefully, and teaching someone else gave me an additional layer of practice and explaining, instructing, and using English naturally. And reflecting on the mentorship journey, I realized that I had internalized a powerful set of communication tools, instructional language, sequencing, conditional phrases, asking and answering questions, giving advice, narrating processes, expressing opinions, and describing experiences. And these tools were applicable not only to cooking, sports, or budgeting, but also to school, friendships, and other real-life situations. And I noticed that my confidence in English had skyrocketed because I could now describe tasks, explain reasoning, ask questions, clarify doubts, negotiate steps, and reflect thoughtfully without hesitation. And emotionally, I felt a deeper sense of accomplishment because learning from my stepdad had strengthened my ability to interact respectfully, accept guidance, communicate clearly, and collaborate effectively. And I could express this by saying, I feel grateful for the guidance I received because it helped me grow in multiple ways. And reflecting further, I realized that the combination of hands-on mentorship, consistent self-talk, reflective narration, and active participation had created an immersive learning environment that naturally integrated skill development and language growth. And every success, minor mistake, clarification, or discussion contributed to my mastery of both practical skills and English communication. And I also recognize that patience, empathy, curiosity, and openness were essential not only for learning a new skill, but also for engaging effectively with others. And I practiced expressing these values in English, saying things like, I appreciate your help, or I will try again with more attention, which reinforced politeness, clarity, and social fluency. And as the mentorship journey concluded, I felt a profound sense of achievement because I had not only acquired new abilities, but also developed confidence, independence, and a natural way to communicate complex ideas. And I realized that the strategies I had learned asking questions, explaining steps, reflecting aloud, negotiating, and applying feedback would continue to serve me in all areas of life, from school to hobbies to social interactions. And this experience taught me that mentorship is not just about teaching skills, it's about guiding, communicating, and creating opportunities for growth. And every interaction with my stepdad reinforced both practical abilities and language fluency, making learning meaningful, memorable, and effective. And I hope viewers understand that by seeking guidance, engaging actively, reflecting thoughtfully, and practicing consistently, anyone can develop skills, improve English, build confidence, and achieve personal growth because each step, question, and reflection is a chance to improve, communicate, and grow. And this journey with my stepdad has shown me that learning is most powerful when it combines instruction, interaction, reflection, and self-expression, and that confidence, mastery, and fluency come from immersive, authentic, and meaningful practice. And sharing my story as Sarah, I hope inspires others to embrace guidance, practice actively, reflect consistently, and use every opportunity to speak, explain, ask, and narrate. Because the lessons I learned about communication, reasoning, instruction, emotional intelligence, and language are valuable for life, language, and personal growth. And by embracing mentorship, asking questions, following steps, reflecting, and practicing language actively, anyone can transform challenges into learning, mistakes into mastery, and guidance into fluency and confidence in English, while also building practical life skills, emotional resilience, and meaningful relationships.